The Watcher in the Woods Park Ranger. Daniel Carter had seen a lot in his 10 years working at Black Pines National Forest. From lost hikers to bear encounters, he thought nothing could surprise him anymore. But that all changed one cold October night. It started with the calls. Distressed hikers reported hearing strange noises deep in the woods. Guttural growls, unearthly screeches, and the sound of something massive moving through the trees. At first, Daniel dismissed it as coyotes, or even a mountain lion. But then the reports became more frequent, more detailed. One hiker claimed to have seen a figure standing at the edge of the tree line, tall and unnaturally thin, with glowing eyes that reflected the moonlight. Daniel decided to investigate. He packed his gear, grabbed his rifle, and headed into the forest just before sunset. The woods were eerily quiet, as if the animals themselves were hiding. The only sound was the crunch of leaves under his boots as he followed the trail deeper into the trees. As night fell, Daniel reached the area where most of the sightings had occurred. He set up camp, built a small fire, and kept his rifle close. Hours passed and nothing happened. He began to relax, thinking it was just another false alarm. But then, he heard it. A low, guttural growl echoed through the trees. It didn't sound like any animal he'd ever heard. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. Daniel grabbed his rifle and scanned the darkness. That's when he saw it. Between the trees, about 50 yards away, stood a figure. It was tall, at least 8 feet, with long, spindly limbs that seemed to bend in unnatural ways. Its skin was pale and almost translucent, like it had never seen the sun. But the worst part was its face. It had no eyes, just hollow sockets that glowed faintly in the dark. Its mouth was stretched into a wide, grotesque grin, revealing rows of jagged, needle-like teeth. Daniel's blood ran cold. He raised his rifle, but the creature didn't move. It just stood there, watching him. Then it tilted its head to the side, as if studying him. Daniel's finger hovered over the trigger, but before he could shoot, the creature let out a bone-chilling screech and vanished into the trees. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He kept the fire burning and his rifle ready, but the creature didn't return. At dawn, he packed up and hurried back to the ranger station. He filed a report, but his superiors dismissed it as exhaustion or an overactive imagination. Daniel knew better. Over the next few weeks, the sighting stopped. Daniel began to think maybe it was over. But then one night, as he was closing up the station, he heard it again. The growl. He turned around, and there it was, standing at the edge of the forest. This time it was closer, and it wasn't alone. Behind it, deeper in the trees, were more figures. Dozens of them, all tall and pale, with those same hollow, glowing eyes. They didn't move. They just watched. Daniel quit his job the next day. He moved to the city, far away from the woods. But sometimes, late at night, he hears that growl outside his window. And when he looks out, he sees them, standing in the shadows, grinning. They're waiting, and they're patient. The Vanishing Trail Yellowstone National Park is known for its breathtaking landscapes, but it's also home to secrets that defy explanation. Park Ranger Emily Torres had heard the stories. Hikers who went missing, strange lights in the sky, and whispers of something ancient lurking in the wilderness. She never believed them until she was assigned to patrol the Blackfoot Ridge Trail. The trail was remote, surrounded by dense forest and jagged cliffs. It had been closed for weeks after a group of hikers disappeared without a trace. Search teams found no signs of them. No footprints, no gear, nothing. The only clue was a single torn piece of clothing hanging from a tree branch, stained with something dark and sticky. Emily was tasked with reopening the trail and ensuring it was safe for visitors. She set out at dawn, her backpack filled with supplies and her radio clipped to her belt. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves absent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. As she hiked deeper into the trail, Emily noticed something strange. The trees looked wrong. Their trunks were twisted, their branches gnarled and reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder, and a faint metallic smell hung in the air. She checked her map, but the landmarks didn't match up. It was as if the trail had shifted overnight. Then she saw it. a narrow, overgrown path branching off the main trail. It wasn't on the map. Curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to investigate. The path led her to a clearing where the ground was scorched and barren. In the center stood a massive stone archway, covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. Emily approached cautiously, her hand resting on her radio. As she stepped closer, the symbols began to glow brighter, and a low hum filled the air. She felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. She turned to leave, but the path behind her was gone. The trees had closed in, forming an impenetrable wall. Panicking, she tried to call for help on her radio, but all she heard was static. Then a voice came through, a distorted, guttural whisper that sent chills down her spine. "You shouldn't have come here." Emily spun around, and her blood turned to ice. The archway was no longer empty. A figure stood beneath it, tall and cloaked in shadows. Its face was featureless, save for two glowing white eyes that seemed to pierce through her soul. It raised a hand, and Emily felt an invisible force pull her toward it. She fought with all her strength, but it was no use. The figure's voice echoed in her mind. "You are not the first. You will not be the last." The last thing Emily saw was the archway glowing brighter, as if opening to another world. Then everything went black. When Emily didn't return, a search team was sent to find her. They discovered her backpack and radio near the Blackfoot Ridge Trail, but there was no sign of her. The trail was permanently closed after that, but locals say if you hike there at night, you can still hear her voice on the wind, whispering a warning. Stay away. And sometimes, if you're unlucky, you might see the archway glowing in the distance, and the figure waiting beneath it.